We are on air. It is Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Higher Ed Live. Higher Ed Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts, which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. You can be a part of today's broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. And you can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter over on our homepage. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Cornell University, M. Stoner, and Omni Update. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In September, M. Stoner is hosting a complimentary webinar focused on optimizing your design eye. No Photoshop experience required. We are tweeting out a link where you can learn more and register. Omni Update is the leading web content management system, the CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS is called OU Campus. It's secure and scalable. It has great tools and features, flexible deployments, and an awesome user community. You can learn more about Omni Update's analytics gadgets in their blog post and see how your website is performing today. Just sent out a tweet with that info as well. I'm your host, Ashley Budd, and I'm really excited to bring a group together today from the East and West Coast. We have StudyMode folks joining us with a brand new research report about our own student psyches and how they are perceiving the world before them, and there's some really interesting findings about students' interest in programming and how they perceive it will help them in their careers. I'm also bringing on Sven Oz from Mount Holyoke College. Sven is a longtime friend of Higher Ed Live, and I'm excited to have him joining this conversation to talk a little bit about the implications of this research on higher education and to talk about a new conference for college students called Crowdsource Summit in association with the Higher Ed Web Association happening in Portland, Oregon this fall. So without further ado, I want to bring our guests onto the show. And first, from StudyMode, I want to start with Bettina, and then we're going to go right around, and just want to allow you to introduce yourself to the show, to our audience, and tell me a little bit about what you're doing at StudyMode.
Sounds great. First off, I wanted to thank you, Ashley, for giving us the opportunity to join you on Higher Ed Live. I am heading product here at StudyMode. I've been here since January of this year. I'm very excited with a lot of the initiatives we have going on this year. It's back to school, so it's very interesting to see all the students come back. My past lives were spent at Amazon and at Hulu, where I learned a lot about product development, user testing, A/B testing, and all that good stuff.
Awesome.
Hello? Yeah, hello?
We can hear you, Rich.
Yeah, so I'm Richard Statham. I'm the lead front-end developer over here at StudyMode. I work primarily in web development, building out the interfaces for our platforms across all sites, and pretty much focus on engaging users and creating interactive experiences for them.
How's it going, guys? I'm Jeff Shelton. I round out the product team with Bettina. Pretty much a newbie to the EdTech space as well. I started here in the end of April of this year, so really exciting as well. To really dig in and see what we can do with the space. I formerly, kind of as well as Bettina, came from the entertainment sector, both on the creative and on the vendor side, building out mobile apps, websites for that industry. But I come from also a non-technical background, degrees in comparative literature and film.
Awesome.
Hi.
Ben.
Hi, I'm Sven Oss. I am the lead web application developer at Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts, where I build and support web applications with a team of staff and student colleagues. I am also the Vice President of the Higher Education Web Professionals Association, or HiEd Web, which is putting on the Crowdsource Summit conference in Portland, Oregon this fall, at which I will be speaking.
Very, very good. Well, great introductions. I think we need to showcase to our viewers a little bit more of what is happening at StudyMode, and then talk about this report that has such interesting findings. So, Bettina, can you tell me a little bit about StudyMode, how it's playing in the ed tech space?
Sure. So StudyMode's actually been around for a really long time. It's actually a dinosaur in the ed tech space. We've been around for 15 years, and our mission is to really help students study and research more effectively by creating these accessible and effective tools online. So StudyMode itself is a research library containing peer-submitted or student-submitted research materials, course notes, AP notes, book notes, anything that will help you and inspire you to write a paper or research whatever you are researching. Excuse me. So we also have a few other products that we're rolling out. Cram.com is one of our favorites in the office. It's a online digital flashcard database that allows you to upload your own flashcard sets and then study them in several different ways, but we can get into that a little bit later. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an overview of StudyMode.
I love that you called it a dinosaur. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe the evolution and you know, the driving mission that has kept this company going for 15 years? And I apologize if that's coming out of left field because you've only been there since January, but just to give us a sense of, you know, the passion behind the people that work there, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So it started off, you know, typical cliche story, if you will, with our CEO freshman year in college, where he really was curious to see if he could do anything with you know, student-submitted papers. A lot of times these papers just end up under someone's bed, you know, but there's actually a lot of ideas that come out of these papers. If you will imagine like just a digital classroom online, which is actually becoming more and more common these days, but back then it wasn't. He really took kind of the Napster model of sharing music online to sharing papers online so that you can, you know, further develop your ideas and whatnot. So he did this. I'll let Jeff get into Blaine's background, but he built this site up with one of his buddies and then really created the business maybe, or professionalized the business maybe about 3 years ago.
Great, thanks for that background. Jeff, can you tell me how you folks have gotten into the research space and these student psyche reports?
Sure. So to segue off of what Bettina was saying, you know, going back to that 15 years, Blaine and Chris, our CEO and CIO respectively, didn't really have a technical background. So they saw this need and basically said, you know, what can I do to create a site or launch a site? So during one break, Blaine picked up a PHP book, and when they got back to school that next semester, they had a functioning site that then would kind of iterate over the next 15 years to become what it is today as StudyMode. So we kind of wanted to get in the heads of students today. You know, going back 15 years, they still were facing the same problems and issues and roadblocks that students have today. So just to get into their head, get into their mentality, and see what the importance to those students are in that technical space. You know, that was an idea that Blaine had with no technical background, and now we serve over 2 billion page views, you know, worldwide. So it's a pretty cool story to see what one little thought and a little you know, self-taught can do.
You know, I'm so glad to be talking about that on Higher Ed Live because I think any faculty or academic affairs viewers watching today are probably cringing at the Napster, you know, product for papers. And Sven, back me up if you think that is, you know, that would be the reaction. And I think from a curriculum building and, you know, academic affairs standpoint, that kind of fear really it stops innovation in that space. So we have to turn to folks that are brave enough to kind of break down those boundaries and give the students what it is they're craving, because I know, working so closely with students, that they are always hacking what we are trying to get them to do to make it quicker, better, faster, easier, and that's a good thing, and I think we should embrace it. So I'm glad to have that background story before we're moving forward, because your psyche reports, I'm sure, are part of how you tap the minds of the students and stay on top of what it is that they're thinking. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Rich, I think, did you want to go over the results a little bit, Rich?
Oh, yeah. So as far as the results, we found a number of things. One was that 61% think coding will be a competitive advantage when it's time to job hunt, yet only 23% really know how to code. Other figures, more men are more likely to be women to be than coders, and then also that more than 54% learned in school versus 30% that are self-taught. I think some of the takeaways for me was the reliance on being self-taught. When I went to school, there wasn't an emphasis put on coding in the sense of web development. So I took it upon myself to learn, and I think it's interesting that there's that barrier where there's content out there, yet not a lot of people have access to that. I think it's one of the problems that we try to solve here at StudyMode, where we have the platform, we have the content, yet we're trying to bridge that gap to get students to also find access to those resources.
To add to that a little too, you know, for me it was interesting seeing those results, being that I was self-taught such as Rich was. The barrier to entry definitely is lower, so now it's just connecting the dots and getting people to those resources online to code. One thing that I thought was really interesting was, albeit a small percentage, 5% of the kids who did learn know how to code were under the age of 7. So I thought that was a pretty encouraging, you know, albeit small kind of demographic of what we canvassed, but to know that there are resources out there for even kids of that age to be able to learn those proficiencies and grow, you know, through high school and college with those.
Yeah, I think what struck me most interesting was still the remaining gender gap. I went to school a long time ago, but in my class there were about 30 kids. I was 1 out of 4 girls in the class taking computer science, and we still see that gender gap now. So I think it's very important for us to bridge that gap and encourage girls at a young age to start looking at science and engineering and trying to show them what technology can solve, because I think it is very interesting, and it's nice to see that there's a lot of Kickstarter projects starting to come about. There's a little storybook called Ruby, Goldie Blocks. Rich showed me a site earlier today called Made with Code. All of them very focused on getting girls interested in these fields.
I have to say, after working 6 years at the Institute of Technology, in admissions, if I could get 4 girls in a in a classroom of 30, I would still be happy. So there are long, long ways that we still have to go, especially in the computer science fields. And so let's talk more about these major findings. It sounds like being self-taught still on the top of students' minds, but their desire to want to have these skills is really interesting to me. And we found, and your findings were that these students are looking for opportunities that aren't there. So as a higher education professional, this isn't just a curriculum problem that needs solving, but it's actually a potential opportunity for marketing the kinds of programs that students might be looking for, in combination with degree programs that we might not have thought coding should exist for before. So I want to throw that that thought to Sven because he's working on this Crowdsource Summit project that I think is right on the line of what those gaps are trying to bridge, and it's still on the outside. It's still students having to self-advocate to have these kinds of resources, and then we can talk a little bit about how educational technology can help bridge those gaps as well. Sven,
yeah.
hear your thoughts.
Well, where the web is available, it's hard to think of jobs or parts of our lives it doesn't touch. Web and coding skills can be useful and relevant for anyone in their work, in their personal lives, and in achieving their various goals. So the High Ed Web Association strives to advance web professionals, technologies, and standards in higher education. And the Crowdsource Summit is about the next generation of web professionals. Our primary audience is college students who are interested in pursuing the web as a profession, and that can be coding and non-coding aspects of it. We're going to be teaching about how multidisciplinary web work is, how the web impacts humans, why we create for the web, the human side of content, interface development. College students know the web as users, I think, in a way that many web professionals probably don't. But most of them are consumers of the web. The Crowdsource Summit and opportunities at their institutions can help turn consumers into makers and allow them to bring their own ideas and dreams to fruition on the web.
You know, I think it was Jeff that, when he introduced himself, said that he was a literature major. Was that right?
Yep, that's right.
I was an astronomy major.
And
Cool.
me major. I have a painting degree, and you know, and it was one of the things that stood out in the marketing of the Crowdsource Summit to me was this marketing push with the faces of people who build the web, and that you look at their backgrounds and they are not always technical, and I think that's such an important shift to understand in the educational space. So back to our StudyMode team. Tell me a little bit about the actual technology that you're providing to students that's helping them bridge that gap, and what you would like to see from educational partners to kind of help solve these problems that you're working on.
Yeah, I think for me, there's that gap that I was discussing earlier, and we have the platform, we have the tools. We're just trying to figure out the best way to bring those tools to the students. Likewise with higher education, I think higher education also has a lot of resources available for these students, yet there's a gap bringing that empowerment to them to say, like, hey, you don't need to go somewhere else, we could provide those tools for you.
Kind of going back to myself on that comparative literature, 15 years ago in college, what was really interesting is, when I was in college, it seemed like technology and coding was this silo that was off to the side. I had a professor once who, when I was doing a thesis, made us do an interactive essay for one of our honors theses. And it was this really interesting kind of sprinkling of technology through that writing process. So it definitely kind of put a bug in a lot of my friends, during the time of learning some of these practices and being able to use technology platforms that we have to highlight, maybe non-technical work as well. So, just because you're not, a comp sci major doesn't mean that you can't use some of these platforms and technology to really kind of showcase yourself and learn these proficiencies, and who knows what's going to happen, over the course of your career.
So can I ask you what kinds of products you're focusing on, and as it relates to this report and in the coding space, and then maybe we can get Sven's take on, as they were putting together this Crowdsource Summit, what are the kinds of of things that they thought students would need to be prepared for these web careers. So if we could come up with this dream curriculum that students might be able to use as an ad hoc as an ad hoc basis to fill in the gaps for their own curriculums that they're being provided by the institutions.
So for us, our mission is not just to help students code. Certainly, if they want to, put up their coding content on the site, they're more than welcome to. I think that's actually there's a lot of potential there, right? Solve how to create Battleship online, and then all of a sudden you can have another student say, well, I solved it this way, and I solved it this way, and then together I think you can really bring up something much cleaner and much more scalable than what they had initially. The other site that I wanted to talk about was cram.com, which is one of those, it's digital flashcards. Everybody uses flashcards. I was actually a computer science major and used flashcards to memorize certain theses or certain theories that you just had to learn in order to program in a scalable fashion. So that platform really comes to light when you're trying to learn anything, and we've tried to make it as flexible as possible. So for whatever you're trying to learn, be it you're trying to teach your kindergartner how to read, all the way up to medical students trying to memorize biological terms for the board exam. We find all that type of content on Cram, which is very compelling.
Awesome. So Sven, when you were putting together or helping, maybe you were putting together the whole summit, I'd like to give you all the credit for it, but I know there's a huge team working behind it. Can you tell me a little bit about what the summit is aiming to teach? Because I know that it's touching on really important key parts of what it means to be a web professional, both from the skill set side and accessibility to culture, which I then want to talk a little bit about culture.
First of all, I'd like to say, I think I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Sorry. I'd like to say that the conference committee for Crowdsource Summit deserves all the credit on that. I thought it was a fantastic idea, but I'm one of the speakers and not one of the planners, so all due credit to them. But one of the things that I find very attractive about the web as a place to use my coding skills is that the technology changes so quickly that I'm obligated to never stop learning. And if you began learning to do stuff on the web when you entered college, you'd be using different technologies by the time you graduated, or you wouldn't be prepared to enter the workforce. But aside from the technology side, we have to really think about the ways in which web development is changing and the ways in which consumption of web content is changing. So at Crowdsource, students will be exposed not only to standards and best practices, but also the human side of content and interface development. That includes topics like accessibility, usability, user experience design, mobile interfaces, content strategy, and also how the web is being used to conquer the digital divide.
And what can you tell me about maybe the filtered pieces that we're trying to get across to students who are interested in the ed space?
In working in education specifically? Well, personally, I think that one of the most rewarding parts of my job is working with young programmers and web developers who are going to be entering this workforce. I've been managing a group of student programmers for 3 years at Mount Holyoke College. We are a women's college for those who don't know that about us. So I'm helping to deal with the relative dearth of women in the workforce, which feels really good in the coding area. I am constantly blown away by the talent of the student programmers that I get to work with. And they don't all come from computer science backgrounds. I've had a chemistry student working for me, a neuroscience student working for me, all sorts of different things. They have the talent, and we can help them put it to use effectively. And for those of you who are working in education or educational technology, I mean, I strongly encourage you to get involved in mentoring student programmers. Talk to your boss, make time in your schedule, work with the next generation. You will be so glad that you did that.
Thank you. From the outside, I don't want to call you. I want to call you our third-party solution partners, our educational partner side. What can you tell me about what it's like to work in this space and the culture at StudyMode? Bettina, do you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's actually very exciting. We are a small company. We make up about 25 people, and we run in. We're very light. We're very light and nimble, I guess, and there's not much of a hierarchy. Everybody was a student, so everybody's sort of an expert in the space. We know what's missing. A lot of us are a little bit older, but we have a lot of young kids. I think we just hired a web developer on Rich's team who's fresh out of college, and he's got a lot of great ideas. So it's really fun to see all these products come to light where we can only imagine how our school experiences would have changed had we had all these tools. It's funny, we always sit around and talk about how to develop products and stuff. Since we all have the same experience of going through college, we're all able to contribute ideas like bridge the gap. Where are things missing? What didn't make sense when we were going to school, and how can we make these tools more accessible or make these tools more effective? It's just nice to have such a close-knit group of people who have gone through the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, go for it, Rich.
Oh no, I was going to just say, never have I experienced any other work environment where it's such a flat organization. I mean, speaking about our newest hire, he sits right next to our CEO, which says a lot about visibility and accessibility. We try not to put anyone higher than anybody else. We're all here for the same mission, which I think is really refreshing. We're trying to further education, trying to further our products, and really just focus on that versus bureaucracy or anything like that. So I find that one of the most interesting about our company culture.
Yeah, from my perspective, it is very flat as well. There's not a lot of egos, and it's really just about getting the best products out there. Previous organizations I've been with, they've been focused about, let's talk about culture, let's talk about, we're going to be lean startup, we're going to do this and that, and it's great to talk about it, and it really comes back to the people and the adoption. So, great culture just kind of happens, and so, I feel definitely blessed to be with such a great team here as well. So it's really just about, everyone's on the same page, and everyone just wants to put out the best product as possible.
I think our institutions stand to learn a lot from you. I did not once hear the word silo, which usually comes up on my show every time I do it. So I applaud you for that kind of an organizational structure that clearly leads to such a great culture in your organization. I do want to make sure Jeff has time to talk to me a little bit about engagement and the community around StudyMode and these products, because I think it'll tell us a little bit more about how the students are really interacting, and it might, for those working in higher education, tell us a little bit about our student communities that we don't know.
Sure. I mean, even going back 15 years to today, the methodology here is really about creating product around need and feedback. So for us, one of the most critical things is the community of the members that we have. So if we're not building products that they're engaging with, then we're kind of missing the mark there. So for us, a big focus is on creating a product that people can can use not as just a one-to-one transaction. You know, I'm not going to go to a site, get what I need, and leave, and then we don't see you again. We really want to be there, you know, whether it's from the high school age for the bridge to college, and even kind of, you know, further education beyond that, for students to be able to have a central source that they know that they can go to for a variety of reasons to support their learning however they may need it. So for us, it's really about, you know, leveraging those 90 million people who use us worldwide, creating surveys like this, getting a better, you know, pulse and heartbeat of what they need, and then being able to deliver on that.
Great. And Rich, can you tell me about how that impacts some of the workflow that you do? Can you tell me? Yeah.
No, I was just thinking as he was talking about, I think one of the most rewarding things for me, or the way we live in now, is that we'll push out a feature or push out something new to the site, and the feedback is instant. Like we'll see comments on Facebook or Twitter or about like, oh, this feature was great. Oh, okay, we also do this, and it's that kind of like back and forth, and that sense of community where, I mean, I came from an advertising background where you just push something out and it gets lost in the abyss of whatever marketing campaign they're trying to do. With the product that we're building, it's gratifying to see that people are learning, not only just self-teaching themselves whatever or researching a paper. It's all about also giving that feedback, also building a community for themselves and empowering themselves, basically, which I found one of the strongest things about our sites.
And I'm going to ask this last question to the group. If you want to take a couple minutes to think about it before responding, that is fine. And what I think we haven't solved yet is really how we bridge these gaps between behind the tools like you're producing and the students that are actually in the classroom with these needs now. And what can we do to help our institutions embrace innovative tools that might feel like they're wrong for some reason? I keep going back to that Napster for college papers that just would not fly by the provost. How do we get products that are moving faster than our institutions can create them themselves into the hands of students, where we know that we have students kind of hacking these things together by themselves anyway, right? If we don't provide it for them, they're going to do it anyway. So what is, how do we smooth this out? How do we make these technologies available for our students so they can learn more? What's your chew on that?
I can take that.
Okay.
For me, I was just having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and I think one of the biggest things is incentivizing the adoption of a lot of these. There's great resources out there like Code Academy or Khan Academy, and in the conversation yesterday, it was just discussing, at the high school level, a lot of times these coding classes and these, in classroom type offerings are purely just electives, and so they don't actually count towards high school graduation. So I think there's kind of a base level thing that needs to change there in terms of providing these tracks that then really do count towards graduation. And I'm sure there's varying differences between different districts or school systems, but at a very base level, just really incentivizing the adoption of that from that ground level.
I think with the adoption of new technologies in the classroom and educational technology and so forth, sometimes I feel like it has to be lead, follow, or get out of the way. The students are going to be using this stuff anyway, and educators who aren't accepting or acknowledging or reacting to that fact are going to have a harder time interacting with the students. But I also am fortunate to work in a group that's a merged library and IT organization at Mount Holyoke. We have the Library Information and Technology Services division, and the reference librarians, the instructional technologists, educational technologists, all work together in the same organization as IT, and so there's a lot of conversation and give and take between people about new technologies and the challenges that people are facing, and trying to help people adopt tools that are valuable to them. And I think that kind of coordination and communication across a group can be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Sven. I also think that transparency is key between organizations like our own and educational institutions. We really need to figure out, why certain institutions or educators are on service, all the ed tech services out there, and bridge that gap and possibly do more of like a just a open forum of what are the things that need to be created in order to make them more comfortable. So for StudyMode, we've created, we have all these essays and everything, but at the very end of each of them, there's a citation tool, so that if you refer to if you take any ideas from the paper or reference any of these ideas, it's very easy to create a citation and give whoever created it proper credits or proper accreditation. So when we show teachers that, they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I'm really sharing the idea rather than, quote unquote, stealing the idea, because we really don't want to go that route, right? We're really for more collaboration, more idea sharing, and that's what we should be doing with educational institutions as well.
Yeah, to go on Bettina's point as well, I think it's the idea of collaboration. It's more about sharing ideas to further thought, and I think having education, like higher education, on board to push that forward and to be an early adopter of these technologies. With all their resources available, they also have the means to do it right, and they know the problems, and we're trying to provide those solutions. If we can work together and collaborate with those problems and solve them, I think that's the earlier we do that, the better we are in the long run.
Well, I hope we took one step closer to that open forum today. And I want to give you each the opportunity to let us know what we can contact you for if you have, if any of our viewers today have follow-up questions. I know our StudyMode folks have pretty easy email addresses to connect with. It's just their first name at studymode.com. Again, if you want to quickly run down the line and remind folks what it is you're working on and what you welcome questions for, and Sven, how we can find out more about Crowdsource Summit would be great.
Yeah, I can start that out. So again, I'm Bettina Chan Martin, or Bettina CM on Twitter, Bettina at StudyMode.com, head of product here at StudyMode. Would love feedback across any of our products, and we're constantly looking for ideas. If you're in the LA area, feel free to stop by. We're in West Hollywood. And yeah, so send me feedback, send me ideas, what you'd like to see in the marketplace, and if we need to have that open forum, I'm open to that as well.
Great.
Great, and then thanks again. Jeff Shelton, Jeff at StudyMode.com, Fancy Jeff S on Twitter. I know I get a little flack for that, but anything web, mobile, technology, analytics, even outside of the tech world, I'm always interested in a good conversation. So feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and you can find me at richard@studymode.com. Again, this is Richard Sathang, lead front-end developer at StudyMode. You can also find me on Twitter at richmedialab. And yeah, I'm always open for questions or comments or open discussions about user experience, user interfaces, any of that.
Awesome.
Yeah. And once again, I'm Sven Oss. I'm My email address is saas@mtholyoke.edu. I'm also at Svenaas on Twitter, Svenaas. And I welcome communication either way. My Twitter handle's slightly easier to remember. The Crowdsource Summit information can be found at crowdsource.highedweb.org, and I'll tweet that link. You can learn more about the conference there or register. It's taking place October 17th and 18th in Portland, Oregon, and I would love to see you there.
Thank you very, very much, everyone, for taking your time this afternoon to have a great conversation about the future of educational technology. As always, thank you to our program sponsors, mStunner and Omni Update. Without you, this show is not possible. We are back next week with shows from Student Affairs Live and Marketing Live. You can receive a weekly reminder about these shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. If you want more professional development right now, you can go ahead and browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. I'm Ashley Budd, and I will be back with you next month for more Higher Ed Live. Thanks for tuning in.